in welcoming the moderator, Mr. Mayank Kumar, co-founder and managing director at Upgrad, and our esteemed lineup of panelists, Dr. M. Jayaprakasan, Joint Director, IT Cell, Director General of Training, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Ms. Shreyasi Singh, founder and CEO, Harappa Education, and Mr. Shantanu Paul, MD and CEO, Talentsmith. Welcome, everyone. Without further ado, let's get started with the session. To you, Mr. Kumar.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for having us here. But I know, it's a tough day for having a panel discussion. The good part is because of COVID, everything starts on time. And hopefully everything will end on time. But it's a tough day for us to sort of catch up, given the phenomenal victory that Indian team has just achieved after 5 days of grueling test match. So I don't know how am I able to sort of have this conversation right now, while on the other hand, all kind of emotions are flowing through. But today, guys, we have a session to cover where we are going to talk about creating workforce for tomorrow and transforming skill landscape. It's a topic which I'm sure that all the panelists here, it's very close to all of us. And there's a lot for us to cover. I mean, there's a fair amount of conversation happening in terms of with World Economic Forum coming in and suggesting about 85 million jobs will get lost by 2025. But at the same time, 100 million jobs will get created. So in that backdrop, what the job of tomorrow would be, what the careers of tomorrow would be, what the workforce of tomorrow would be, is something that I would love to sort of have a conversation with all our panelists today. But before we get started, for this particular aspect, I just wanted to maybe call upon Dr. Jayaprakasan with a request for running us through a brief 3-minute government perspective on skilling. So Dr. Jayaprakasan, over to you, post which we'll get started with the discussion.
Very good afternoon to all, and warm New Year greetings to each and everybody joining the things. Also, on behalf of the Director General of Training, Ministry of Skill Development, we are very grateful to the Indian Mobile Association of India, Internet and Mobile Association of India, for providing a opportunity regarding the India Digital Summit Transformation, a digital platform, creating workforce for tomorrow. So let me have a small walkthrough about the DGT initiatives on the skill development for transformation of this, creating the workforce for tomorrow. So the Director General of Training and the Ministry of Skill Development is running the Industrial Training Institutes, called a program called TRAP Training Scheme, which have a 14,767 ITAs with a seating capacity of around 34 lakhs. We also deals with the apprenticeship training, on-job training for those who have completed the ITA. And also we are making the trainers training called the CRAFT instructor training. And also we are providing a upskilling, reskilling for the people already working in the industries. So the ITA skill ecosystem is one of the traditional, since 1950s, strongest. It's institutional based and they're skill oriented. Mainly we are a hands-on skill, and one of the largest, more than 20 lakhs trainers workforce per year. The entry level starts from 8th standard to 10th standard. We offer 137 courses on 40 sectors, and compared with the CBSE, this is one of the biggest system where around 24 lakhs of students are enrolled. At the age of 17 or 18 itself, the ITA system prefers the blue-collar workforce of average 13 lakhs per year, which are readily available in the market. So as we are moving to the new age skills, digital transformation, industrial revolution 4.0, as all we know, is ruled by the IoT or the internet. So some of the technology areas are like AI or machine learning or cloud computing or data analytics, where the top technology is the data analytics or IoT or a blockchain or machine language. As this fourth industrial revolution unfolds, fueled by the adoption of this top emerging technology, companies are seeking to reach newer heights with efficiency, production, and consumption, expand to the new market, competitive on the new products for a global customer base, composed increasingly in digital natives. Technology by itself is not disruptor, but not being customer-centric is the biggest threat to the any base. The journey towards creating a superior customer-centric experience begin with creating a people-centric experience. More and more, employers are therefore seeking workers with new skills and further afield to retain competitive edge for their enterprise and expand their workforce productivity. So, as widening the skill gap, the IRS does not take away new jobs but replace them with a job of a newer breed. One requires upskilling and reskilling. So, the evolving job market, 133, as already told, 133 million new jobs are created to be by the Industrial Revolution 4.0 and 75 million are going to be displaced. So there is no doubt decreasing the need of human in traditional job, but increasing new jobs at a higher rate. So the top industrial challenges as the people coming from the graduates coming to the job market are not fit to the industrial requirements. So mostly the industry spends time on training, that's upskilling and reskilling. So what happens if the upskilling and reskilling after 2 years, 3 years, it will be hired by the major industries. So again, the MSME has to spend time on reskilling the people. So most of the MSMEs are spending time on as a training center for freshers, and more established larger industries acquire this resource by paying marginally higher salaries, making it difficult for MSME to grow faster and bigger. So we have to build the institutional mechanism itself to get ready for this journey. So the need of the hour, restructuring the current academic framework of ITI, more industry linkage with new areas, continuous upskilling of existing ITI trainers in the new technology areas, establish online communication to know the knowledge sharing, and also support the ITI system with adoption and mentorship by the local industries. So trends in the skill engineering jobs, the fourth industrial revolution, new and specific technical skills, computer literacy, IT skills, multi-skilling with the flexibility, ability to continue, learn, and reskill. About 60% is your core skills, but 40% is the employability skills, where the communication, team working, problem solving, customer service awareness, taking the responsibility, these are things. So to make the students or the trainees to be more employable, we made the employability skill as a part of the curriculum, where there's 26 lakhs of trainees in the IT system. We are making the employability skill as a mandatory component for this curriculum. Moreover, delivery is one of the things. We should have a master trainer. So we have a partnership with the Cisco, Accenture, and Quest Alliance, and creating the employability skills syllabus. And Quest has developed the e-learning material and their transformation. So we are making a fully digital transformation. And also one of the IR technology, cloud computing is one of the front runner. So there is more than 1 billion cloud computing job roles are available by 20. So we partnered with IBM, and IBM started an advanced diploma on IT, networking, and cloud computing in 2018 itself. Initially started with 2 institutes with 19 candidates. Now it has grown to 50 students in 2020 at 18 national skill training institutes. So the first batch of 18 students has got 100% placement. The highlight of the program is 3,000 rupees per as a stipend for first 1.5 years, and 15,000 rupees stipend through the internship of last 6 months provided by IBM under CSR. And also placement support is provided by IBM, and faculty support for the course also provided by IBM. That's the highlight of this advanced diploma course. Moreover, DGET is proactive on introducing the new technology, the new age course like 3D printing, geoinformatic assistant, IoT technician, smart agriculture, smart city, smart healthcare, drone technology, smartphone technician, soil testing, solar technician, and already we rolled out in 125 ITIs. And now we are trying to promote this new age course, at least one ITI in each district. And also we are trying to change the affiliation norms, that any new ITI want to start any new courses, one course should be the new age course. That's our agenda to scale up. And also we are partnering with the industries like NASCOM and IBM, Microsoft, Quest Alliance, and SAP to increase the at master training level, trainers training capacity with the section for our countries. So IBM, we are offering a 2 years diploma course, and also to train our trainers on basic artificial intelligence skills. And IBM with the DGET started a skill-built platform, a mentor-based platform to guide the students and the trainers to adopt and certify the new age course. Also, Cisco Net Academy is part of our NSTS we include, which offers cyber security and CCNA courses. And Quest Alliance is doing the employability skills. With the SAP, we are having a data science. And Microsoft, we are having a certified training for Microsoft Technical Associate and Office Associates, and also AI and data analytics. NASSCOM is SSC NASSCOM is supporting fully curriculum development as per the industry standard across the country, and Adobe also supporting. And we are also discussion with Google, Oracle, AWS to scale up further on the tech partners.
Just a request, sir,
yeah.
Sir, after 10 minutes mark, so just
okay, just I'm rolling up. I'm over. It's going on. So we have the Bharat Skills platform to provide digital initiatives to conduct the courses on online as well as blended content. And as during the COVID, we trained around 35 lakhs of students during the COVID situation from the March to the S-on date through the blended training, and also through the industrial partners. We trained around 1.8 lakhs people, and we are providing a blended content so that it will be a supplementary to the add-on classrooms in major 6 grades, which covers 70%, and so phase 2, we are going for 23 courses with a 80% coverage. So thank you very much. We are welcoming the industry to join with DGET for further skill development. Thank you very much.
Perfect. No, thank you, Dr. Sorry, this is very useful. Text. There's a bit of an echo. Yeah. No, it sets the context. Thank you very much for the time. And I think it brings me back to, I think, perhaps 2013, 2014, Shantanu, when we met a long time back. This was talking about similar problems. Problems are remaining the same. But one of the questions that maybe I'll start with you, Shantanu, before we get to Shreyasi, which is, I think whatever that we are seeing, Shantanu, from the time, I mean, you have been running this for a very long time, and you have seen this from close quarters. One of the challenges that we foresee always is that in this skilling, upskilling piece, there is this educator, there is government, and then there is corporate. And companies come in and play a very active role in what Dr. Jayaprakash also mentioned. But multiple surveys are saying that workers will require reskilling every 6 months to a year. Multiple surveys are also saying that people expect their colleagues and their team members and the employees to learn hard skills on the job, and therefore the formal education is coming into question, of the last mile just-in-time training come in. Given Talent Sprint and your sort of experience on that front, Shantanu, that you guys have been offering a lot of nuance program on AI, machine learning, fintech, so on and so forth. Could you just elaborate that? Are these seeing a greater push from the employers, telling the employees why to take up these modules and sort of get upskilled? Or are you seeing more employees themselves getting pushed through and coming to Talent Sprint saying, let us help us get skilled? And therefore, in that sort of group of people, how do you see the role of employers, recruiters, and someone like Talent Sprint coming and playing a role? And maybe it could be just good to hear your journey and your perspective before we get to Shreyasi and some of the other points.
Of course. So thank you so much, Mayank. I hope you can hear me, all of you. So yeah, I think Mayank laid down I think we met about 6-7 years ago on this whole journey, and I think you're right about how things have evolved. I think to your specific question, that it's very clear that deep tech education, in fact, Dr. Jayaprakash also mentioned that he called about top technologies for IR 4.0. I call them deep tech, right? So if deep tech is the area where things are going largely, one of the fundamental changes is that, of course, the nature of, people don't really want to take generic courses, traditional programming, etc. anymore, because the employability of that is coming down, as Dr. Jayaprakash showed in his slides, that, it's no longer, if you are a young professional coming out and trying to learn old technologies, your unemployability might even be higher than somebody who, was there before. So therefore, in that sense, I think people have really taken this on their own hands. My fundamental observation is that training and learning used to be a B2B activity where companies to nominate people for training, and training was given to students free, essentially as part of the perks of being a professional. I think that model is largely going away. I think 80% of people that I see who come for upskilling today, young professionals or working professionals, most of them are coming because they want to invest in themselves. It is very clear that a career professional has a need for lifelong learning and at least 5 to 7 interventions over a life career of 30 years in which they have to really upskill and reskill themselves. So first answer to your question is, without a doubt, this is becoming a investment in oneself, a B2C model, a consumer model. So in some sense, learning is now a consumer product. It's no longer a perk that you get as part of your employment, right? And that also is a good sign because it has been shown, the agency effect. The agency effect says that if you are going to invest in yourself, you're going to take care of quality. You're going to pay attention to how much money you spend. You're going to really care about, what you learn. The example I give is that, when people have this joke that training programs where your employer nominates you, people think of that as a nice little break for a week where we go and actually enjoy ourselves. But in this model, you will find students to be far more serious when they're investing in themselves. That's one part. The other part of your question around the ecosystem of employers, corporates, individuals, colleges, etc. I think it's a fairly interesting ecosystem that's evolving rapidly. 5 years ago, colleges did not believe it was they didn't have any fear of saying that, we have to figure out a way to differentiate our students because IT services companies were ruling and they were hiring in such large numbers that it didn't really matter how much skill you acquired in college because IT service companies had huge factories to convert you. But today, with automation 4.0, I think there's a tremendous influx of technology that's displacing traditional low-end jobs. And therefore, unless you come out as a college with a very good set of deep tech skills, I think your employability is deeply in question. So you have to invest in yourself. Last part to your point before I turn over to Shreyasi is that, employers also have realized that the bar keeps going up. So I used to say that, skill gap used to be big. It's now bigger. And technology is coming in to displace jobs. So in some sense, technology is overcoming skill gap rather than training in many ways. Companies are saying that since I can't find people to do certain things, I'll automate these jobs completely. So in that sense, skill gap is also creating more automation and automation is creating more skill gap. So the bar to enter is higher. The quality of people who have to come in is also higher.
No, it's a point that you made, Shantanu. It's interesting. I always keep on joking and telling everyone that, look, as kids, we expect our parents to pay for our education. We grow up and we go to college, we expect government to pay for our education. And then we are getting to companies, we expect companies to pay for our education. So it's been not a journey where people are used to spending on their own. I was telling someone, and maybe all of us will relate to that, we always at the start of the year put down our annual financial goals, investment, health, insurance, but there's no line item for our own education. But there's a much chunkier line item for the kids' education. Now, coming back to skills, I think these changes we all have to battle as an entrepreneur. But on skill front, Shreyasi, we were just doing, I was just putting down some of the top skills and skill groups. So Dr. Jayaprakashan put across all those IoT, AI, machine learning. But one of the things for 2025 that people are quoting as the top skill requirement for the learner are around critical thinking, analysis, problem solving, self-management, active learning, resilience, stress tolerance, flexibility. No one talks about this, and I think with Harappa, I think there's a strong focus on not the so-called hard skills of the world, but very strong components of soft skills, which we don't talk about. So could you just talk about why that thought process came to Harappa and where do you see the challenge coming in?
Sure. Thanks, Mayank. I think, as Shantanu was saying that he focuses on deep tech or IR 4.0 as Dr. Jayaprakashan, I was actually thinking about, maybe at Harappa, we need to come up with a similarly evocative categorization, maybe human tech or something, because then maybe it will get taken seriously. Because I think this, obviously the Harappa curriculum, the focus is on cognitive, social and behavioral skills. And it's interesting. And one of the big reasons for us to focus on these skills really was to say that there are, I think there has been a growing understanding of this sort of, training at the job, training in a job and this half-life of tech skills or hard skills and this continuous training. And I think that conversation has picked up steam thanks to many of you, including a Talent Split, Upgrad and others. But we felt very strongly that actually the slippage, and what Shantanu was also saying, that actually the skill gap keeps adding up. And here they're saying that these foundational skills, as we call them at Harappa, foundational competencies. If you don't get them in school systems and higher education systems, actually you can go through your life sort of never having been taught them. And you've listed out the names of sort of all of the skills that every research firm will say are the most important around creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, whatever, however you want to bunch and categorize them. And we felt like these skills are not just very critical for an individual's professional growth and personal growth, but as well had a massive impact. The lack of these skills had a massive impact in the groups and teams these individuals were part of, and obviously on the organization. So I think we have a lot of conviction that this is actually perfect, that there are other people sort of focusing much more on the other technical, deep tech, however else we want to call it. We are very committed to focusing on this side of skills. And even though we need to build that conversation up, and I think that evangelization of that kind of curriculum, as well as understanding of how it works, is something that, as an educator like ourselves, we've taken on. But I have to say that since we started Harappa 2.5, 3 years back, we had thought that we'd have to do actually much more convincing on the fact that these skills are important, because, people have told me all kinds of things. These are flaky, floozy skills. How can you even measure them? How can you teach them? How can you learn them? Are they nurture? Are they nature? Are they innate? Can you never, whatever? So, that kind of skepticism, of course, continues to go on. But whether even in campuses, and because we do a lot of, Harappa does a lot of work with campuses across the country, and especially in undergrad engineering and postgraduate MBA, I see hearteningly sort of a realization, and we've done lots of surveys and whatever to find out what are the 3 skills students feel are most important for their success. And consistently, almost communication skills for sure, right? I think speaking skills, everybody feels the communication skills is almost like a no-brainer, comes up all the time. So there is a growing understanding in these skills, and actually the massive impact of not just the new graduates coming into the workforce who we want to train, but the burden of inheritance of, generation after generation having continued to be in the workplace without having got this foundational sort of scaffolding of the kind of skills that we're talking about, is a pretty dire situation, right? And I think it's, and I think the other thing that has happened that we've seen, at least in 2020, and I'm sure we'll possibly talk about the impact of the pandemic, is this. I've seen actually many more older learners, 45, 50 plus as well, sign up for the courses on Harappa, courses on speaking effectively, listening actively, negotiating wisely. So I think there is this whole thing, and I don't think we're as fully functioning adults and professionals out in the world. You don't just strengthen one part of yourself. It's fine, you can have depth of expertise in 1 or 2 things, but you do need a broadly average and above average breadth of skills, which all come together if you want to grow in your career. So there's I never believe in anything binary in education, especially in India. I think there's so much broken and so much for all of us to do. So whether it's online and offline, great. Tech, non-tech, great. Async, sync, great. Listen, we need to just evolve and improve on all of them.
No, I completely agree with Tracy. I think my biggest problem with this, the so-called categorization of all these skills as soft skills. The moment I use the word soft, it gets very soft. And I think when it gets soft, it gets very difficult for people to take it very seriously. And maybe on that question on growth. Yeah.
I was going to say, Mike, I want to add something after you finish. Please go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Shantanu.
No, I was making this observation while Shreyas was speaking. By the way, I'm 200% agreement with everything she said. The point is this, I think we have turned skills into a noun. We talk about, AI, machine learning, data sciences, cybersecurity, all the things we talk about in the concept of skills are nouns. But actually, skill is a verb. Researching, writing, presenting, coding, testing, deploying, look at them, they're all verbs. So we don't get paid in this new economy for knowing the nouns. We get paid for knowing the verbs, right? And that is the fundamental difference. I think the way this entire technology education has evolved, or even the skill education has evolved, I think in some sense we're teaching people nouns without the verbs. And I don't think they can therefore apply anything in real life. And what Shreyas is talking about is all the verbs. So when you combine the nouns with the verbs, you get actually meaningful sentences. And that's when people they start performing meaningfully and substantially.
I want to add one thing to what Shantanu said, Mayank. Shantanu, actually all the courses on Harappa are named after verbs, right? So it's like speaking effectively, writing proficiently, negotiating wisely, because you're so right. And I think that's a really, we're talking about skilling for the future and a workforce of the future. The fact is, as adults, learning is not about knowledge. Learning is about action, right? And I think you have to enable people to do, not to know. And I think that's and I think that's what differentiates skill from knowledge. And I think that's really important for us to talk about. And I think, he put it really well.
No, absolutely right. I think when we design curriculum, even at UpGrad, our only guidance is use action verbs to design what the curriculum is going to be. Don't use passive verbs. But Shreyashi, you raised a point in your conversation, knowingly or unknowingly, you pointed that the systems are broken in multiple places and in various sort of aspects. And that's what maybe, Dr. Jayaprakash, coming back to you, seeing it from the government aspect, we saw 3 million people trained, 100,000 sort of learners, 3 lakh, 4 lakh people sort of going through training and so on and so forth. But as you are seeing that ecosystem evolving, government is doing a lot on that front to sort of bridge the skill gap, both on soft skills as well as on hard skill. But from where you guys are sitting, what role do you see, let's say, the EdTech ecosystem currently providing in order for government to meet their objective of skilling a large section of society? Because I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there, Dr. Jayaprakash, who would be very glad to sort of participate with the government in various means and forms. But just from where you guys are sitting, how do you see the role of private sector sort of EdTech providers playing in skilling the overall, maybe the objective of skill gap till 2022 till 2025 from a government perspective?
Yeah, it's a nice opportunity also. Even if you have Mercedes-Benz, if you are not knowing how to drive properly, what is the use of safety of the car? So today we are talking about the technology, but how to drive the technology to the ground level? See, I can talk about AI or something, all are talking about the words. How many have hands-on experience? Now that you are talking about the soft skills, it is not soft skill. We renamed as employability skills to meet the workforce. Second thing, when you want to reach the ground level, you should have a trainers. The major scarcity today is trainers, how to transform the things. So we need the support of the technology, the tech partners like industries who have the practical. Today, what is the situation happening in the engineering college or university? Those who have completed the BE, they are going for MTech or PhD, again back to the faculty. So they never seen the industry. These are the people going to train the future generation engineers. A blind will lead another blind. So we need the expertise of the industry to guide. So we don't want the industry to be a candle to light some areas. We want the industry to be matching to light many candles. So with the support of industry, we create a source of monster trainers. In the trainers, again, they decimate to the next level. Like that, we have to propagate into the entire system. So we require the support of industry to guide us on building the reskilling or upskilling the master trainers to deliver the skills to the ground level. That's a main challenge we are facing, and we are support of many industries on this. We are already doing, and we are more happy to interact with more industry in a large scale, because we are producing around 20-25 lakhs of students per every year to the work market. As we are moving to the IR technology, every area the industry revolution has come, whether it's a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician or a retail or anywhere, the technologies started playing the role. So we have to adapt the technology, means we have to train our kids, next generation, to meet these challenges. So the government, industry, and the association all together join for the common cause and deliver the skill. It is not the responsibility of government alone.
No, we have been looking at, I think both Shreyashi and Shantanu have had enough experience and exposure working with some of the government initiatives also. But maybe just, I know that we have 10 minutes left on the dot before we open it up for questions. I'll try to combine those two topics which I spoke about earlier. Maybe Shreyashi, I can start with you. Look, I mean, everyone is working from home. You have a nice backdrop. So I'm assuming that's going to be your office going forward also. And it's not going to shift when the office starts opening up. But with the COVID impact, Shreyasi, have you seen the ecosystem changing significantly? And if there is some learning for younger entrepreneurs and AMI audience, where is the change happening? And just from looking at that and with this work from home situation emerging, do you see the workforce of tomorrow to have a very different skill mapping, or what the future of what should the ideal workforce of tomorrow look like, just from your context where you guys are sort of looking at the market right now? So I know it's a loaded question, but yeah, would
Yeah,
love
I know that's
a good answer for
there are
that.
lots of questions. We are going to get back to office. This is my home, but I think we now want to get back to office in a few weeks or a couple of months for sure, because it's we've added a lot of people to the team, and it's many kinds of issues are obviously coming up. But I think what we've seen, for example, at Harappa, I think we changed very significantly. I mean, I think we're a better team, better company. Hopefully, I'm a better professional as well, having gone through this. And Winston Churchill says, "Never waste a crisis," and everybody's been using that. And I think it's very important for educators. Where systems are broken, you can't want to go back to whatever was the pre-normal, new normal, less normal, whatever, right? I think you've got an opportunity to really drive change, and it would be a real shame if we didn't drive change in a meaningful manner because of what we've all experienced and the assumptions that have been broken for so many of us. And I have a great amount of respect, especially for faculty and teachers in schools and colleges all across this country and every country, because almost with very little training, that they had to shift completely sort of 200 years embedded sort of system and try and teach it in a different way is a massive change, right? And then to go back to, if they were to go back in 6 months to do exactly what they were doing, that would be a real shame. So I think the one thing that I would certainly urge, as we all emerge a little bit and life sort of, as we open up and mobility starts and we start going on, is really think very thoughtfully and deeply without any status quo assumptions about what we want to preserve from what we have learned in the last 8-9 months. And I think that's really, really critical for educators and employers, educators and employers, because you asked me the question about employers as well. I think, fortunately for us, and I don't know, maybe because, there's this whole research about entrepreneurs being optimistic, and then for you becoming more optimistic as you're an entrepreneur, that certainly seems to be happening to me, because I just feel like the Harappa curriculum has just become even more relevant, right? So, for example, when you work with each other, when your only way of interacting is really through your words, whether on an asynchronous email or in a live conversation like this, your ability to communicate effectively actually has to get better. You could depend on sort of the intimacy of body language and knowing somebody and seeing somebody. You don't have that crutch to fall back on. So I think that has gone up. I think change, resilience, great. A lot of those conversations, I think everybody has understood that our change muscle organizationally, as an organization, as a team, as individuals, as professionals, has gone up. So what do we want to retain out of there, right? That's the second thing. I think organizational skills is something that you organize yourself very, very differently, and you organize yourself for efficiency, to break fatigue and things like that. So those are 3 or 4 things that I certainly would want, just to recap, for educator and education institutions to think about what they want to retain from their Zoom experience, whether it's attendance, whether it's using Kahoot or something for little quizzes, so that teachers are freed up for much more interactive dialogues with their students, and really use that opportunity. And similarly for employers and teams to be able to do so much more of, I think, better communication skills, better organization skills, and letting people learn how to learn and to embrace change. And the last thing that I'll say, that I've been saying a lot recently in discussions, is I know for many people, many aspects of at least learning online, especially for schools and college students, would have been a suboptimal, subpar experience, right? And I think I want to say that, listen, we're really at the black and white movie era of online learning. We're all just really getting started. So what you've experienced in March 2020 or April 2020, when people just moved on without any prep, is not what online learning will be. It will be, I have, sort of the click stream of data and analytics you have, it will be much more better. It will be more immersive. It will be a much more enjoyable experience. So even if you've had a bad experience, don't think things won't change and that they won't get better. We will evolve, and I think things will get better in the way that we design online learning programs. And that is sort of really for me the key the key insight really to take away, that we have improved so much in 10 months. So imagine 5 years out, 10 years out, where we will be.
Yeah, I think one of the things that at least I'm seeing and looking at my son doing online programs, I realize that one of the biggest advantage of classroom education is to teach kids to sit at 8 hours at stretch in a single position, so that they can do the same thing in a factory or in the office work. Unfortunately, that learning is getting missed out. But I'm hoping when the school gets back on, they learn how to sit at one place for 8 hours at a stretch. But Shantanu, just maybe one of the things that maybe get your perspective on to close on the conversation. See, I was looking at some of the LinkedIn data points, and maybe it's interesting for all of us, all the panelists here. That in India, a person is changing job on average once every 3 years. So every 3 years, we are shifting one job. That's the average number. In the US, it's about 8-9 years. In the UK, it's about 7 to 8 years. So Indians are shifting job. Otherwise, they're just playing with LinkedIn and adding promoter, TEDx speaker, or whatever that is. But LinkedIn is throwing up that data point that every 3 years, people are changing job. In the context of transforming skills, because while government has a first-time skilling agenda that we need to get people to be skilled with the new age area, but education is no longer a vaccination that once done, you're good for the rest of your life. But is there a change in the education system that you foresee to prepare for the workforce of tomorrow, wherein we are starting with not just one-time intervention as you graduate from CBSE school, you get into something, but the intervention is going to be more frequent. And are you seeing that change happening both from tech ecosystem perspective, but also from what government is doing currently on both the aspects?
Okay, so I mean, the point about continuous education, lifelong learning, I think is absolutely becoming mainstream. To your specific point about changing jobs every 3 years, I discourage that as a general habit. I think we may be in the early throes of hyper exuberance as an economy, so therefore this is happening. But I think eventually we settle into a 5, 6, 7 years as a standard cycle, and I believe that a person will have 6 to 7 such experiences in a 30-year career, right? So that's, I think, where the stable equilibrium will be reached. I don't think 3 years is a great example for now, but it is what it is. Having said that, I think there has always been in India in the workforce and starting the student mindset, go back all the way to high school and how people want to write IIT, JEE, etc. There is a bit of an exam cracking mindset that we have built over the time, and it's all syntactical learning that, what do I have to do to get the exam? In fact, one of the funniest things I always ask people on the first day of a coding bootcamp is like, what do you want to know? And they want to know what the exam will be after 3 months or after 6 months. And I'm telling them like, that's actually the wrong question to ask, right? You should be asking what the experience of learning will be. So having said that, I think we do have that problem of wanting to know the question paper for the next, milestone that we want to hit. I think that is beginning to change. I think one of the biggest things that has happened in the last 2-3 years, and I think COVID is accelerating it. So in some sense, I link it back to your previous question. I think the idea of vanilla skills will get us a great career, I think, is largely those days have come to an end. And this has also been symbolized by the fact that, big IT service companies have drastically dropped their recruitment numbers. And now it's no longer a linkage between headcount and revenue. So that also is broken in terms of industry. So now it's all about innovation ability, creativity, a lot of things that Shreyasi will talk about, plus the hard skills that I think fundamentally changing and altering the landscape of the industry, right? So I think in many ways, I think it's premature for us to declare what the future will look like or what the new normal is. I think it will evolve like all new normals. It will come to some new state. It will certainly not be the old state. It will be a new state that is a combination of the past, good things of the past and good things of the crisis that will be forged together into something new, hopefully better. I like to give the example like, I think economies need shocks to change behaviors for the better. 2016 December demonetization in India is in some sense the beginning of UPI and the entire fintech revolution on payments. You take away demonetization, you will not get 2 billion transactions a month on UPI happening, period, right? And before that, there were an infinite number of reasons bankers used to give as to why digital payments are not safe, not good, not possible. Same thing is happening in education now. Without COVID, for the last at least 20, 30, 40 years, educators have been telling us that, oh, we cannot teach remotely unless we see the person in the same room and look at the whites of their eyes. Teaching will not happen. I think this has proven that that is not true. So in many ways, I think this is the equivalent of a demonetization moment for the edtech industry, and I think that's all for the better. And I also agree that just because things have changed drastically doesn't mean you found the final solution. The final solution will emerge from all of this. I think we have to be patient. The last point I'll make to finish off this whole thing is that, and this is more to your previous question to Shreyasi, so I'm kind of borrowing that question again. She used the black and white movie example. I use the same example. Teaching used to be like teaching is a performing art. Let's start with that assumption. Then in the first stage of performing art for a few hundred years, teaching was like stage plays. Stage actors hate doing movies. A stage actor will always tell you that teaching, recording a movie is just a bad medium. But in reality, stage acting evolved to movies, films, and films became far more scalable and far more popular source of entertainment because of the scale effect. So today we are just going through the same transition. A few hundred years of stage acting on stage in terms of a classroom is coming to an end, and the new format will evolve. And I think in some sense, I feel like educators are being forced because of circumstances to become, going from stage actors to camera-facing actors, right? And therefore, with that will come a new set of skills, a new set of constraints, a new set of possibilities. So I think that's where we are. We should see this whole thing as a journey that has gone through some very interesting situation, which will create and open up new possibilities. So I'm by and large very optimistic. Having said that, I also don't enjoy the fact that kids are having to get stuck up in home and 8 hours a day. I think it's brutal. I think all this is proven, I think both for the workforce and for students, is that we used to think we went to the workforce to work and came home for a social life. The opposite seems to be true. We used to think that kids went to school to learn and came for a social life. The opposite seems to be true. People want to get back to the social life at work or at school, as the case may be.
Initially, it was a great thing. Initially, it was happy to see work from home, and the students also enjoyed. Nowadays, that became boring for them. No physical activities, no movement. All are like jail only.
No, it's work from home and fun at work. I think that's what it means, right? So that's what we're all missing. The fun at work is gone, and the fun at school is gone.
This is a great unbundling, right?
Yeah. Dr. Jayaprakash has gone back to work and having fun at work. So we can see that he's in the office right now, while most of us are trying to sort of figure out working from home.
The government is always working. We are working from July onwards, but you are enjoying home.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're just getting to some questions, guys. So I think we are moving to the last 8 minutes of the panel discussion. There are a few questions. Maybe I'll put it on if anyone wants to take it up. The first question, interestingly, maybe Shreyasi, this could be relevant for you. Can any one panelist share more concrete details on present capacity building, skill and training program or online working? And I know, Shreyasi, you did raise that point that body language disappears. The body is only till here. So I don't know how much language can you sort of go through when you're working remotely. But maybe I'm reading this question as for remote work. Are there specific kind of training or specific kind of skills that are needed today for someone to succeed in a remote ecosystem, online working ecosystem?
Yeah, people can visit bharatskills.gov.in, where we have provide the IBM and the other tech partners, where there will be courses on new age course. More than 7,000 courses are available with the links, the Skill Build and the Cisco and the NASCOM. The people can get reskilling or upskilling, and they can get a better opportunity. And also there's a mentor based and job oriented courses also available. Even placement support also will be provided. bharatskills.gov.in, where we have the complete various courses for upskilling and reskilling is available. People can use that opportunity.
No, that's a good point. I think one can check it out. But just maybe on that, Dr. Jayaprakash, or to Shreyasi, anything on skills for remote working and how to sort of build a meaningful career in online?
I think we use a lot of behavior science and habit from, sort of the science of habit creation at Harappan as a pedagogy approach, right? And I think that's, I think most of what we do in life, whether it's on nutrition, whether it's on fitness, whether it's on training our mind, is really about behaviors, breaking everything that we do in small behaviors and directions and habits. And I think from a work from home I think everybody's experience has been so different. So I think first understand that everybody has different challenges, right? And what are you struggling with? I think it's really important to keep asking yourself, what are you trying to fix for? And I think we don't think enough about, even when we choose learning programs for ourselves, or even when our employers choose learning programs for ourselves, is what is the journey of where I am and where I want to be, right? So in your case, what are the unique challenges that you have while working from home? Is it a feeling of loss of connection and camaraderie with your team or with your peers, and because of that you don't understand the problem and therefore you are not motivated? Is it a motivation challenge? Is it a discipline challenge? Is it a skill challenge that you have to recap at the end of a day, a daily activity report which will require you to write and you hate writing? So I think and I know this person asked for specific answers, but in sort of a wide question like that, it's really difficult to get specific. But I would certainly say, very simply, take a piece of paper or a blank sheet, Word doc, and really say, what truly do you know? What are you struggling with while working from home? Write down the top 3 things that you're struggling with, right? See what would, and once you have that, then you can easily design a program for yourself. And my sense is, in 80% of the cases, like Pareto applies everywhere, it will be about motivation, connection, discipline, and some kind of skills. And for each of these, there are actually so many courses available for you to try and access across many online learning institutions, and do that and give it a try.
No, I agree. I think one of the things that at least I have found it challenging, Prayasi, has been that when you're working remotely and you're talking to someone remotely, as a leader or as even a colleague, it's very difficult to sort of create that influence when all the body language part, the full body has disappeared. So how do you even sort of make a statement without, I mean, you can't see the roll of an eye or a twist of the face. And those things people are learning. And I guess what you're saying is that, look, it's up to you. What are the things that you're looking at, and build on top of that and try to sort of come out strongly in this one. But just maybe moving to another question that came up, and both Shantanu, Shreyasi, and Dr. Jayaprakashan raised that point. So Shantanu, maybe I'll ask you this point, that there's a lot of talk about one-on-one personalized coaching, but that comes at a much higher price because, I mean, connecting one-on-one is an expensive proposition. But the question is that, A, do you think from a business perspective it is viable? And B, does it help both the mentor, coach / teacher and students? When there are models on the internet when you can do 1:many, but one-on-one has its own charm and its own efficacy out there.
Yeah, no, I think this is obviously a great area of experimentation, and frankly, in the K-12 level of EdTech, which I don't think we are doing here, there is a lot of this happening as we speak, right? One-to-one mentoring, coaching, etc. I mean, White Hat is a good example of coding happening at school level. Despite all the other things we have been presented with, that apart, I think fundamentally one-on-one is effective at that level. At the working professionals and young professionals level where we are operating, I think most of us, I think companies like yours, Mayank, Upgrad, you've been doing a lot of this, basically harvesting talent and bandwidth from industry and putting it back into work. In our case, I can give one specific example, even though I don't think Talentsmith is yet a major innovator in this space. We'd like to. We have this great program with Google on women engineers. It's the world's largest women coding bootcamp program, producing 600 women engineers from second-tier towns for global deployment for companies like Google in R&D, right? So if you look at that model, we have found that the quality of students from the previous batch are so outstanding, and they are getting into these amazing companies as interns. There is actually a benefit. If your mentor is close to your age, but is an outstanding performer, the transmission is outstanding, right? You can actually assign a one-to-one with it's like saying, if you are a student in, let's say, Ivy League college in the US, and you're 2 years your senior person, let's say you are in Berkeley and 2 years of senior is actually giving you some advice on how to do well in your current program. I think it's actually very effective, because very often the age gap and the distance between a very senior person and junior person, even though we like to believe mentoring is all about gray hair, I don't think it is true. I think mentoring can actually work very well if high competence person pairs up with somebody who needs that competence and they are closer to age. So we've been doing that successfully, and I think models are currently being deployed and experimented with. But I do believe that I call it the 3 legs of the stool or the tripod. One is, of course, the intervention education. One is the projects, hands-on experiential learning, and the third is the mentoring. And here, incidentally, in that same program, Google has identified 50 women engineers, world class across the world, to mentor these students, right? So there is a 1-to-4 mentoring ratio between the Google engineering students also on top of it. So yeah, I think we're using all these models, but I don't have anything to declare that which of these are really the best.
Mayank, I can add to this because we've experimented with this at Harappa as well. So we have something that we call the placement readiness program, which is like a combination of courses that we actually for final year students in campuses, right? And there is many elements of one to few, one to many, and one to one. And again, we use exactly the kind of industry mentors, which is somebody who has 7-8 years of experience. So somebody wants to go to marketing, it's somebody who's working in an FMCG company at 8 years. And I think what we found is, and I think that's again a revolution sort of waiting to be had in India, is each one teach one, right? And we found lots of sort of, spirited young professionals who want to spend 2-3 hours in a week to be able to work with a student or two students, whatever their time permits. The other thing that we did, and that's working really well, and in fact, the supply of coaches, as we call them, for the whatever has been, I mean, we have more people who want to work with us as a coach than we might have, than we need right now. The other thing that we did, really trying to, from some of the models that are available in the K-12 way in one-to-one coaching, is our flagship course is the Speaking Effectively course. We went B2C thanks to COVID and got 15,000-20,000 people onto that course. And we said, hey, some actually asked for, can I get individualized coaching on this after the completion of the course, right? And so we are experimenting with, hey, can you do 4 sessions of an hour each? But somebody asked this question from the lens of, is it whatever for a business? Like Shantanu said, I agree. We are also trying, we are also experimenting. It is obviously, if it works out, but scaling quality, cost, efficiency, matching the right mentors, it does have many things to think about before I think any of us can declare victory on it and feel like it is an experience that you can control fully and be confident of.
No, perfect. I think this rounds it up well. I think I'll just maybe round up everything. It's been there's been at least in the last 3-4 months, there has been some bad news with all the COVID and all those things coming in. Automation and the COVID impact has been a double whammy. But as I guess both Shantanu and Shreyasi said, that each of these opportunities and crisis gives you many opportunities to work on. I think good part is that we are seeing that this entire skilling initiative and upskilling initiative is a far more deeper thing than what everyone thought it to be, a very urban phenomena. I think the numbers that we heard today and earlier, that the EdTech companies are seeing 2-3x growth in revenue, 3-4x growth in number of students enrollment. Companies are seeing a 5-fold increase in people coming and taking online programs. The government estimates said it's a 9 to 10-fold increase. So it clearly demonstrates that it's a far more deeper phenomena happening. It's not just a very urban and sort of tier A phenomena coming in. And that gives us at least, hopefully, Shantanu, after 6-7 years, if we meet up for another conference, we will be talking about a far deeper sort of penetration. And Shreyasi, hopefully by that time, soft skill will not be called as soft skill. And Dr. Jayaprakash and many of the private sector entities would have come and participated with government to bring more and more employability. But with that, thank you very much. I'll pass it on to Yavisha to take up the last 30 seconds to close the session.
Thanks, Mayank.
Thank you, Mayank.
Thank you, dear panelists, for taking time out to join us today and for sharing such valuable key insights with us. I would also like to thank our valued partners, Reverie Language Technologies, Philose, ReadyWatch, InShots, WiseApe, Financial Express, and We Communicate. We'll be back in 10 minutes for yet another exciting session. Please do visit the Expo Hall and check out the booths on display. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,